The latest in Trump land, a federal judge on Friday denied two of former President Donald Trump's motions to dismiss the federal election interference case against him. District Judge Tanya Chutkin ruled, saying that presidents do not have absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for acts that fall within their official responsibilities unless first impeached and convicted in the Senate.
This comes as a New York appellate court reinstated the gag order blocking Trump and his lawyers from making public statements about court personnel. Trial Judge Arthur Engeron says he plans to enforce the order, quote, rigorously and vigorously. And his order specifically follows Trump, I believe, reposting or posting images from an article by Laura Loomer, who's a kind of extremely pro-Trump MAGA gadfly reporter. Actually says she's so pro-Trump that she's had a number of clashes with Ron DeSantis. She hates Ron DeSantis with like the burning hot heat of 1,000 suns. It's really it's very like horseshoe like extreme liberal criticism of DeSantis and Laura Loomer like this. Anyway, Trump in this article, I think she called attention to, and I can't speak to the veracity of it, I haven't seen it, but calls to attention some kind of social media post by the judge's wife that were very anti-Trump, and so Trump reposted that, and so now this judge is effectively ordering him to stop doing that. Which I don't know. Again, this is in the context of a trial. It's recognized that judges have rights to impose gag orders to limit your speech capabilities. I've previously been somewhat skeptical of gag orders in general, and I think aspects of the gag orders against him have certainly infringed on his ability to campaign, to effectively criticize not the trial personnel, but in fact at one point Mike Pence, who's both a witness to the January 6th stuff and is not anymore, but was a opponent in the 2024 Republican happenings. That's not the case anymore. You know, stopping him from maligning court officials is, I guess, par for the course in a lot of these trials. I know his supporters are going to say, you know, him and his surrogates are calling out the bias of the court officials, and they're criminalizing that, and that's not a good thing.
I'm sure they will say that. I mean, I think so much legal action wouldn't happen if there were a little maturity in the room. I can't imagine that the judge's partner, that his wife has a big Twitter profile or whatever social media this was, and that she wasn't, meaningfully affecting public opinion about Donald Trump by posting her personal thoughts about the man until he elevated it on his Truth Social platform and got millions and millions of eyes on whatever her subjective opinions of him might have been. So regardless of who's right or wrong, this does seem to be one of those cases where I might advise my client to simply let sleeping dogs lie and not to stop antagonizing the court. But here we are. I mean, I do think the bigger story here is this question of whether or not Donald Trump was going to be successful in his bid for kind of an extension of presidential immunity. The Supreme Court historically has extended presidential immunity from civil lawsuits concerning actions taken as part of your official duties. But you can see a lot of ways that departs from what's happening here. A number of criminal lawsuits, and the argument obviously is what Donald Trump was doing was not simply vetting the veracity of various election fraud claims, but specifically fraudulently creating documents or directing the creation of documents that would overturn official election results. So the court seemed to be broadly unsympathetic to Trump's arguments here, saying that, quote, defendant's 4-year service as commander-in-chief did not bestow upon him the divine right of kings to evade the criminal accountability that governs his fellow citizens. And I do think that's an interesting framing, because so much of what I think independent-minded conservatives have been frustrated about is that Congress members, elected officials, do seem to be able to act with immunity and play by a different set of rules than the rest of the public. But it does seem when it comes to Donald Trump that there's a little inconsistency there. There is a push to frame him as being unfairly prosecuted, that the Justice Department is being leveraged against him unfairly. But when you see him making an argument that says basically I was president and therefore I should not be tried for my crimes, he should be tried fairly. I don't think that the justice system should go out of its way to indict him. But the argument that I shouldn't have to submit to a jury of my peers and be responsible for crimes the way that any other citizen would have to, simply because I was previously president of the United States, I don't know that that's the most populist argument I've ever heard.
Well, sure. But we do recognize, I mean, you recognize that the justice system, the law enforcement system, can easily be weaponized against defendants in all sorts of contexts, from the overcharging to mandatory sentences, to the needing to plead, to the ability to impose gag orders. Now, Donald Trump is not the first and only persecuted member of the vast criminal justice law enforcement complex, and the selective outrage on his behalf, I'm sure, can be very vexing. And I don't personally want to make it harder. In fact, I want to make it easier to sue the government. Political figures are not genuinely sympathetic figures to me. It's interesting, you know, what Trump's going down for, right? There's a lot of abuses of power of Trump, of Obama, of Bush, of Clinton, you know, all the way back. And, you know, illegal war making gets no one in trouble. Illegal spying, even when the spy chiefs admit or are caught lying about the extent of the spying, all that kind of stuff doesn't ever get you in trouble. What's gotten Trump in trouble is you know, like, it's being prosecuted. We'll see if a jury decides that it was actually criminal activity. I think some of it looks like very distasteful speech to me that really offended a lot of mainstream people, that was so outside the normal operations of government and media that people like lost their minds about it. And then also some much more questionable, and we'll see if they can prove it was organized to actually thwart the election in terms of the actions taken in Georgia and so on. But, you know, I mean, it doesn't hold a candle to the routine violations of the law committed by political figures.
I agree with that. But if the standard that Trump is advocating for here, the motion to dismiss on the basis that he was president, and that they should have an extended presidential immunity, then that would also preclude any president down the line from being prosecuted for any of the substantive reasons that you just mentioned. So I think it's kind of difficult to argue with this outcome here. I'm sure Trump will. The New York Times seems to think that this ruling is going to spark a series of appeals, so we'll see what happens going forward. But I don't know that Trump wants to be in the position, really, of making the case that, well, how did the court put it? They said, whatever immunities a sitting president may enjoy, the United States has only one chief executive at a time, and that position does not confer a lifelong get-out-of-jail-free pass, said Judge Chutkan, or wrote Judge Chutkan. So, you know, it's hard to argue with that. Yeah, it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah, and Republicans, if they do some self-examination, wouldn't want that to be the case. I mean, they're trying to impeach Joe Biden, right? They want to pursue an impeachment inquiry.
Right,
Again, I wish that was over policies that were blatantly unconstitutional and violated people's civil liberties, like the vaccine mandate or something like that.
Or breaking or ignoring, I think it's the Leary law that says you're not supposed to send weapons to a state that's committing humanitarian offenses.
Sure, we can do our own coming together and you know, charging our political leaders with malfeasance based on violating various rules. More Rising right after this.